Well, let's go ahead and get started on our week 7 instructor session. So, for week 7, we're working on a few things here, but what I really want to focus on is group and team development, how they form, and so forth. This will be very beneficial to you in your professional lives, obviously, but also in your personal lives as well. You really probably haven't thought about how many groups and teams that you have been a part of, or might be a part of now, or could be a part of in the future. So let's go ahead and jump into the material. Teamwork and the ability to work well as a team is more important than you might think. Going into maybe the medical industry after graduation, well, a recent research study revealed that more than 400,000 patients die each year from medical errors in the hospital setting. But with the right teamwork skills in place, how far could this number be reduced? Don't just think, though, about teamwork in only the medical industry. Without the ability to work well in the team or the group environment, clients and revenue can be lost, safety can be jeopardized, goals can fall by the wayside, and so much more. So, the need for effective team members is ever increasing in our society and even in our modern globalized world. One researcher even said that as the challenges escalate, the need for teamwork elevates. And I really like that quote because I think it's very accurate. But we live in what we call an individualist culture, and that means we focus more on the I instead of the we. So, living in an individualist culture such as ours can mean that teamwork skills can be a difficult sell to students sometimes. And that's why this week's readings and concepts that we're going to cover are vital for not only exploring the why behind why we need effective teamwork skills, but also the how and how we accomplish this in everyday life. Remember that effective teamwork skills can be the difference between that promotion that you've been wanting, that new job you've applied for, the ability to work from home, because not having effective teamwork skills means you're not as effective as in a virtual group or a virtual team as well. It also can be the difference between added flexibility in your life and even survival at times. So it just depends. So you might be asking yourself, what's the difference between a team and a group? Well, what if I were to tell you that all teams are groups, but not all groups are teams? Let's think about that again. All teams are groups, but not all groups are teams. That's interesting, right? Basically speaking, teams are specialized groups. So let's discuss how teams and groups really differ, though. Now, the level of cooperation between team members and group members can greatly differ. Typically, teams have a much higher level of cooperation than groups do. At the heart of all teams is collaborative independence, or basically stated, the need to work together in order to be successful. Team members who are working to advance their own agendas or their own goals will lack in the area of that collaborative interdependence, because they're not working together, but rather they're on the team in the sense of just the name of it, just being on the team. Because of this, such teams are rarely successful in achieving their goals. So you do have to work together, really and truly work together to be a successful team. Also, teams usually consist of members with more diversity of skills than are often found in groups. Your readings describe how standard small groups are kind of a potluck of memberships. So you might have had a lot of desserts on that small group, but just a few main dishes. So a lot of times people in groups are chosen for roles because not necessarily because they have the skills to be in that role, but rather just because no one else wants the role. So in a group setting, in a small group setting, a lot of times people just fall into roles. And it's not because they have the skill level to do well in that role. It's just they're the only one that was willing to take it. However, in a team requires complementary, not identical skills. In doing this in this manner, team members are also often chosen with more diverse skill sets and are used in roles which better blend with, and even complement the skills that they have. So teams are generally have a stronger group identity than that of a standard group. For example, I personally serve on an academic committee which is devoted to advancing knowledge through research. No one in this small group that I'm a part of is distinguishable at our larger convention meetings based on our appearances. We don't wear name tags telling everyone what our role is on the committee. We don't exhibit anything which might identify ourselves um, from other people who are at the conference. In fact, our committee really doesn't even have a name. However, teams are generally much more identifiable. Team names are often important and often the subject of some kind of intense debate on what their name will be. Teams have more of a sense of cohesiveness and unity, which is like a oneness, which usually is greater than that of a standard small group. And lastly, most small groups require only a limited time commitment and few resources. For example, your readings discuss that a small group, such as, let's say, a hiring committee, normally only requires a few meetings. Once the decision's been made, the committee disbands, and that's it. Little or no money was necessary to have that group or sustain that panel. However, teams require substantial resources and long term commitments. For example, a sports team plays for a season and returns next year. So that wouldn't be a group, that would be a team. While some of the players might be different next season, the team itself is still intact. So, as a whole, group members are the basic materials required for a successful team. And while all teams are groups, again, not all groups are teams, as we can see by the information we just discussed. So, knowing what you know now, really think about this. Have you previously worked on a team, or maybe a group, or perhaps both? Just something to think about. So, why do we form groups and teams? Well, in any professional environment, you're probably going to find yourself being a part of a team. And that team might be a work team, project team, customer support team, supplier team, design team, planning team, functional team, or even a cross functional team. And you might be assigned to in that team a committee, a task force, some kind of steering group, a quality control circle, a flat team, a excuse me, hierarchical team, an advisory team, an action team, or so much more. So, in the professional setting, you'll probably find yourself being a part of this at some point. Businesses are constantly looking for ways to perform the job better and at less cost, so being more efficient. Because of this, they are forming teams for these reasons: better decisions, faster response, increased productivity, a greater buy in, less resistance to change, improved employee morale, and even reduced risks. So let's discuss that a little bit. Why are the teams are often formed, let's say, first for better decisions? Well, decisions are generally more accurate and more effective because group members contribute different perspectives on things, different opinions, and different expertise. So you've got more of a diverse way of looking at things. So it makes for better decisions that way. If everyone thinks the same, you're not going to have the best decision. You need people to really think outside the box and think differently than you do to make better decisions. Also, they form teams for faster response. When actions needed to respond to a numerous amount of things, but competition with a competitor or to solve a problem, maybe in the organization, small groups and teams can act rapidly to help with that response. They also form teams for increased productivity because they're often closer to the action because they're a part of it in their everyday work environment, and closer to the customer. Team members can see opportunities for improving efficiency where someone who's sitting at a desk all day not being involved with the customers and so forth might not see that. So they have the ability to increase productivity. They also have a greater buy-in. In that, I mean that decisions are arrived at jointly, and they're usually better received because members of the committee are more willing to be a part of it and more willing to support it. They also, teams allow for less resistance to change. So people who have input into the decisions are often less hostile about the change, they're less aggressive, and they're less resistant to the change. Teams can help to improve employee morale. So there's a level of personal satisfaction and job morale when you're a part of that team in the organization that increases when the teams are successful. So it can really improve morale as a whole. Teams also help reduce risk. So responsibility for a decision is diffused on a team. So it's not just one individual carrying the risk, it's the team as a whole kind of sharing the brunt of the load, so to speak. So now let's talk about how teams develop. There are 4 phases of team development, and although they have very different purposes sometimes, teams normally all go through the same predictable phases. So one researcher identified the 4 phases, and that is forming, storming, norming, and performing. So no matter what kind of team you're on, you're going to probably move through these 4 phases of team development. Some groups get lucky and they move through forming to performing the very end very quickly. However, most teams usually struggle through certain stages, and usually they make it all the way through, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they go to forming and they get stuck on storming and they never can get off that, and so they never reach their end goal. So it really just depends on the team and that um, collaborativeness that I was talking about before. So let's discuss the stages. Well, the first stage in team development is forming. During this first stage of forming, team members get to know each other. Generally, team members are overly polite, they feel a bit awkward, so they're really just working to get to know each other at this point. They search for similarities, they attempt to bond with each other, and they eventually develop a level of trust in the forming stage. So, members discuss topics at this point, such as why the team is necessary, who owns the team, whether membership is mandatory, how large the team should be, what kind of talent members can contribute to certain roles. So, in this stage, the leader functions primarily as what I like to refer to as a traffic director. So they're just kind of directing people here and there and all that kind of stuff. Now, you want to resist the urge to rush through these first stages of team development and race to that last stage of the performing stage, because you need these first few stages to build a cohesive and productive, trust-filled team. And if you don't have that, then you're ultimately probably not going to make it to that performing stage. So after they do the forming stage, then they move on to the storming stage in team development. Excuse me. During this second stage of team development, which is called storming, members define their roles and their responsibilities. They decide how to reach goals, they iron out the rules for how the team is going to interact with each other. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of push and pull in this stage, because now it's not just getting to know each other, but it's actually working together to meet the goals, deciding what rules the team's going to have to play, and so forth. So, unfortunately, there's a lot of conflict in this stage, and that's why it's called storming, because there's a storm here. However, a good leader can step up and set limits. They can help to control the chaos and they can offer suggestions. So, they more or less, a team leader at this point acts as a coach, and they just avoid what we call negative policing. And teams who have a lot of different personality types can take longer to progress through this stage in particular, because when you when you're working with other people that have a lot of different personalities than you do, a lot of times a lot of emotions are involved. So you've got tempers may flare, some people might lose sleep over certain things, and it can just be a really big power struggle in the storming stage. But most often than not, the storm passes and a cohesive group emerges. Now, like I said, though, sometimes people get stuck here, and with that power struggle, they really just can't push through, and the team will just dissolve basically, so they don't meet their overall goal. But most often than not, the team finds a way to work through it together, and they become more cohesive because of it. And then they move on to the third stage of team development, and that's norming. So once the storm phase has passed, teams move on to this norming stage, and that's a lot of times when Tensions start to subside. Roles are more clarified at this point. Information really begins to flow amongst the team members, so it's not people withholding information for the power struggle and so forth. A lot of times at this point, they've worked through all that. So the group periodically checks its agenda and reminds itself of the progress they're making towards that overall goal at this point. Formal leadership really isn't necessary at this point because everyone is taking on some kind of leadership function, usually within their own skill set. So at this point, too, important data is shared with the entire group, and there's a mutual interdependence, which is typical at this point. So people freely share information, and they're also able to work on their own things as needed, but still sharing plenty of information with the team. And this stage, the group or the team begins to move slowly begins to move smoothly in one direction all together. And then you move on to the fourth stage of team development, and that's performing. So, unfortunately, some teams never make it to this stage. They never survive the first three phases. But if they can push through, the final stage of performing can be really gratifying for the team as a whole. At this point, group members have established routines, they have a shared language, they develop a loyalty with each other and a willingness to help resolve problems together. They have a can-do attitude as they really work towards that overall goal. Best of all, though, information flows freely here. Deadlines are met. Production exceeds expectations. So this is really where they want to end up in the performing stage. So what is completed in these stages? All right. So in the forming stage, in a nutshell here, basically what we were just talking about. In the forming stage, people select members, they become acquainted with each other, they build trust, they form a collaborative culture with each other. Next, they move to the storming stage. That's where the storms start to appear. So they identify problems, they collect information, they establish some kind of decision making criteria, and they start to work to prioritize goals. But don't forget, in the storming stage, that's where roles start to emerge too, and there's often a power struggle. Once they make it out of that stage, they move on to the norming stage, and that's where they discuss alternatives, they evaluate outcomes, they apply criteria, and they just prioritize what needs to be done and alternatives to doing things. And then hopefully they make it to the performing stage, and that's where they select alternatives to actually use. They analyze the effects, they implement a plan, and they manage the project, and they ultimately meet their overall goal. All right. So I apologize to read to you, but I think this is a really great example of how a real team would move through each stage. And I think this will help you to understand those four stages I just discussed in a real world setting. So, allow me to read this to you, and we'll discuss how this team is moving through the four stages. All right. So a team has been pulled together from various parts of a large service organization to work on a new process, a new improvement project that's needed to improve how the company manages and supports its client base. Okay. So basically, we've got several people from this large organization being pulled together to work on a project together. The team lead on this project is Sandra. She's from the Chicago office. She has 15 years of experience as a project manager and a team lead managing these type of projects. The other members on, so Sandra is the team lead. The other members on the team include Peter, Sarah, Tom, Donna, and Ariana. So let's talk about them. So we've got Peter. Peter has 10 years of experience on various types of projects. He has expertise in scheduling and budget control, and he's located in the San Diego office. Sarah has 5 years of experience as an individual contributor on projects. She has a strong programming background. She has some experience developing databases as well, and her office is located in Chicago. Tom has 8 years of experience working on various projects. He has expertise in earned value management, stakeholder analysis, and problem solving, and he's located in the New York office. Donna has 2 years of experience, so she has a little less than everybody else. She has 2 years of experience as an individual contributor on projects, and she's in the New York office. And then Ariana has 7 years of experience on process improvement projects. She has a background in developing databases. She has expertise in earned value management, and she is also in the San Diego office. So, Sandra, who is the team lead, has worked on projects with both Sarah and Tom, but she's never worked with the other people. Donna has worked with Tom. No one else has worked with other members of this team. And so Sandra's been given a very tight deadline to get this project done. Sandra's decided that it'd be best if everyone met face to face first. And even though they're going to be working virtually on the project, she thought it would be best if they met face to face first. So she's arranged a meeting at the New York office, which is the company headquarters, for the entire team. They'll spend 2 days getting introduced to each other and learning about the project. All right, so let's talk about how they move through these stages. So they're going through the forming stage here. The day of the face-to-face meeting in New York has arrived and all team members are present. The agenda for the team includes personal introductions, so you can see how that forming starting here. Personal introductions, team building exercises, information about the process improvement project that they're going to be working on, discussion around team roles and responsibilities, discussion around team norms for working together, and also an introduction on how to use the SharePoint site that they'll be working on for the virtual team and for the project, obviously, and how to share ideas, brainstorm, store project documentations, and so forth. So the team members are very excited to meet each other. Each of them has heard about one another, although they've not worked together as a team before. So they believe they each bring value to the project, and they do. The team building exercises went well. Everyone participated and seemed to enjoy the exercises. While there was some discussion around roles and responsibilities, and even team members who wanted certain key positions on the team, overall there was an agreement on what needed to get done and who was responsible for particular parts of the project. So the on-site meeting in New York went really well. The team members, they got to know each other and they have been discussing their personal lives outside of work, their hobbies, their family, so forth. Sandra, who's the team lead, is thinking this is a great sign and they'll get along well together. They're engaged with each other and they genuinely seem to like each other, which is a great thing on a team. So the forming stage went well. Now we move to storming. Remember, this is where the storms start. So the team members all went back to their own home offices. Remember, we've got people in Chicago and San Diego and in New York and so forth. And they begin to work on the project as a whole. So they're interacting with each other on SharePoint, which is the site they're working on together, and the project's off to a good start. And then the arguments start. So here we go in the storming. Peter has put up the project schedule based on conversations with only Tom and Ariana. He didn't talk to anyone else. Donna and Sarah feel as though their input on the schedule wasn't even considered, and it wasn't. They believe that because they are more junior on the team, they have less experience and such. Peter has disregarded their concerns about the timeline for the project. So they challenged Peter's schedule, stating that it was impossible to achieve all that he had laid out and was setting up the team for failure. At the same time, Sarah was arguing with Ariana over who should lead the database design and development efforts for the project. So while Sarah acknowledges that Ariana has a few more years' experience than she does, um, Sarah only agreed to be on the project because she wanted to take a lead role and really work to develop her skills so that she could advance in the company. So if she knew that Ariana was just going to be the lead and she was just going to be the follower, then she wouldn't have bothered joining the project team. Also, Tom appears to be off and running on his own. He's not keeping others up to date on his progress. He's not keeping his information up to date on the SharePoint site they're all working on. No one really knows what he's been working on or how much progress he's been making because he's focused on the I instead of the we. So Sandra, who is the team lead, initially had decided to take a side role during these exchanges, hoping that the team would work it out for themselves. But she now understands from past experiences managing these kind of teams that it's important for her to take control and guide the team through this difficult time. So she gets all the team members together for a virtual meeting, and she goes back over their roles and their responsibilities, which they agreed to in that face to face meeting in New York. And she works to ensure that they understand the goals and the objectives of the project. Sandra made some decisions since the team really just couldn't agree on certain things, and she decided that Ariana would lead the database design component of the project, working closely with Sarah so she can further develop her experience in this area. So, she had to make that decision. She also reviewed the schedule that Peter created with the team, and she decided to make some adjustments where necessary to address the concerns that Donna and Sarah had about not being able to complete everything. And she reminded Tom that this is a team effort and he needs to work closely with the other team members. So during this virtual meeting, Sandra, the lead, referred back to the ground rules that the team had already set in place in that face to face New York meeting. And she worked um, to make sure that everybody understood how decisions are made and who has responsibility for making certain decisions and so forth. So, over the next few weeks, Sandra noticed that arguments and disagreements because of this meeting were at a minimum. So, she helped. And when they did occur, they were worked out quickly by the team without her involvement being necessary. Still, though, she monitored how things were going. She held regular virtual meetings to ensure the team was moving in the right direction. And on a monthly basis, Sandra brings the team together for a face to face meeting so that they can really stay cohesive and not start doing their own things. So, as the working relationship of the team started to improve, Sandra started to see some significant progress on the project. So once they move through that storming stage, then they come out on the other side, like I was talking about before. Now they're in norming. The team has been working together for nearly 3 months. There's definitely a sense of teamwork amongst the group at this point. There are a few arguments and disagreements that can't be resolved among the team, and they support each other on the project. As a whole, the problem solving issues, making decisions as a team, sharing information, and ensuring that the ground rules put in place for the team are followed. Additionally, in this norming stage, the team members are helping each other to grow and develop their skills. For example, Ariana's been really working closely with Sarah to teach her many of the skills she's learned in that database design and development, and she's been able to take the lead on accomplishing some of the components for the project as a whole. So overall, the team members are becoming friends. They enjoy each other's company, both while working on the project and after hours communicating via email, instant messenger, Twitter, and even over the phone. So they've really started to work out their kinks. And then lastly, because they continue to work through these things, they move on to the performing stage. So the team is now considered at this point a high performing team. It wasn't easy to get to this stage, but they made it through. They're working effectively as a group, supporting each other and relying on the group as a whole to make decisions on the project. They can brainstorm effectively to solve problems, and they're just highly motivated to reach the end goal as a group. When there's conflict on the team, such as a disagreement on how to go about accomplishing a task, the group's able to work it out on their own without relying on the team leader, Sandra, to intervene and make decisions for them. So the more junior members, Donna and Sarah, have really developed their skills as well with the support of others on the team. They've even taken on leadership roles for some components of the project at this point. So Sandra checks in with the team. She praises them for their hard work and their progress. The team celebrates the milestones reached along the way. When necessary, Sandra provides a link from from the team to the executives for decisions that need to come from higher ups and when additional support is needed. And the project ends up on time, within budget. Milestones are being met. Some are even ahead of schedule. The team's pleased with how well the project's going, as is Sandra and the executives of the organization. So let's sum it up. How did it end? The project's ended. It was a huge success. The internal customer is pleased with their results, and there is definitely an improvement on how the company supports its clients. It's been a great 8 months working together as a team. They've had some ups and downs, of course. Each of the individuals on the project will be moving to other projects within the organization now, but no one's going to be on the same project together at this point again. They'll miss working with each other, but they vowed to remain friends and keep in touch on a personal level and hopefully to work together again soon. So the team's gotten together at the New York office to discuss the project, including documenting best practices and discussing what worked effectively and what they would improve on if they had the chance to do the team again. And Sandra has taken the team out to dinner. They're joined by the project sponsor and some of the executives who are extremely pleased with the end result. So it all ended well. All right. Hopefully, that scenario, although a bit lengthy, shows you how teams move through these 4 stages in a real world setting. So you can see where that might have applied in your own life so far, or how it can apply in your future field or even your personal lives. I mean, it could be as easy as or as not as easy, but it could be something along the lines of just being on the PTA at your kid's school and working on a project together. So, all right. With that being said, let's talk about your assignments for this week. And so I want to go over that real quick so you understand what's expected of you in week 7. Okay, so we are logged into our course as normal. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on modules as always. We are going to scroll down to week 7, which is our current week. All right. And we're going to move through this in a chronological order like we always do so you can see what's needed. Okay. So for week 7, we are, well, we have for our week 7 overview, excuse me, we have our summary of information here and what we're focusing on for this week. You might actually want to take a look at this article because I think it'll help you to get a good idea for tips for effective workplace communication. Kind of ties into what we were just talking about. We also have our learning objectives here, which is what we hope that you're able to accomplish by the end of this lesson. So we click next. We've got our week 7 reading. You can see what we're reading there. We click next. You can access your e-textbook here, but you know that by now. We'll click next. We've got our week 7 interactive lecture. As always, just click the link. It'll populate in a new window for you. And you can just click next to move through this until the very end. We'll close that out and we'll click next on this screen. We've got our week 7 discussion. So remember that your initial post is due by Wednesday at 11:59 Pacific time. You will need to respond to 2 fellow classmates in a thought-provoking manner. Again, if you don't know what to do in your response, just include this information. That'll help. So you need to respond to 2 fellow classmates by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. And in this discussion, we're talking about effective group communication. I'll let you read that and post your thoughts in your own time. We'll click next when we're done with that. The week 7 instructor session will be posted here once this recording ends, and you can review it as many times as you need to. If we click next, it moves us to week 8. So we want to stop there because we're not in week 8 yet. All right, so we are going to scroll down though. So that's it for week 7. I do want to talk ahead just a bit on week 8 because we don't have an instructor session next week. So you've got the same things, your overview, your readings, obviously your e-textbook, your interactive lecture, but we will have this week 8 assignment, which is your speech project, draft of your speech. So we're going to click that real quick just so you can get the ball rolling on this if you get ahead on your week 7 assignments. So your assignment details or instructions are listed right here. So you want to click this link to open up the Word document with the speech project details. Again, the instructions are listed here. But what you're doing is remember that, so, excuse me, for your speech project part one, which was, I'm trying to remember what week it was. Let's see. I think it was week 5. Let's see though. Nope. Week 6. Okay. So in week 6, you did the speech project part one. That's where you chose a persuasive topic. And I told you that you were going to build on that. These assignments were going to build on each other for the next few weeks until the final week in the course where you actually deliver a speech. So in week 6, you chose a topic and you provided 2 pieces of research you'd like to include in your speech. So for week 8, which is next week, what you're doing is you're taking that information, your topic and your research, and you're starting to develop your speech. So this will be a written speech. You'll need an introduction, a body, and a conclusion for the speech. You'll need to focus on the topic you've chosen. For instance, if my topic was why people should learn how to perform proper CPR, then I would start with a greater introduction. I would dissect the points in the body of the speech that I want to make, and I'd end with a great conclusion. And I would make sure to include my research. Remember, I told you this in week 6 that you need to include things called verbal citations. And that's by saying, taking that research that you gathered in week 6 and really pulling it into your speech. So you might say something as simple as, according to the American Heart Association, and then give your fact. And that's how you would include that in the body of your speech. So that's what we're working on for weeks give me a minute, week 8. and and again, we're in week 7 right now, but I did want to give you a heads up on what you're going to be working on in week 8 so you can start thinking about it and really start writing out that speech. Now, what'll happen is you'll submit what you have in week 8. It should be a complete typed out speech. I'll go over it, give you a bunch of feedback before you have to submit again in week 10. And so what I'll do is I'll give you some feedback on how to make improvements. You'll make those improvements and then you'll polish it up and resubmit it in week 10 and put the final touches on things. And then you'll actually have your speech delivery where you'll record your speech in week 12. Okay, so if you have any questions, let me know. As always, you can send me an email in the course by clicking inbox, or you can send me an email to sdavis@fortiscollege.edu. I'm always happy to help you with anything that you have. Otherwise, make it a great week, and thank you so much. Bye-bye.